One of the challenges in designing for mobile devices is the number of different devices we have, each with different sizes and different resolutions. On the iPhone, the resolutions have increased, of course, over a period of time, and that in itself is challenging. But then we add in the iPad, it's a whole different form factor with much greater widths that have to be accommodated for. Traditionally in iPhone, we create 3 different sizes of graphics labeled at 1x, at 2x, and at 3x. The version that's used is dependent on the device. It gets even more complicated when we add in Android for doing cross-platform of both iOS and Android with the same code base. On the Android side, we have 5 basic resolutions of graphics that are used, and the various DPI, or dots per inch, on devices varies widely. And of course, then we also have the tablets on the Android side. So to get around that, we use what's called a device independent unit, and that's approximately 1/160th of an inch, and it conforms to the size of the original iPhone. There's a density scale or viewpoint factor that helps standardize the sizing between the devices. I often develop apps just for my own use on either my phone or my tablet, and it's helpful to know what sizes I have to work with for that particular device. And you're probably going to be in the same boat. So in this project, we're going to create an app that allows us to determine what are the dimensions for that particular device, whether it be an emulator or a physical device. And that'll help us in our design work. Again, these are device independent units. Typically when I design, I like to have about a 20 unit margin around, or certainly on the left and right. And so I've built that in here. So this is the app we're going to create. We've got a label for the title, a label for some instructions, a button, and then another label that says click the button above. We're going to have some output that comes up there. And then an indicator, the purple indicator below is set at a particular width. And this purple indicator is a label that is going to change width to reflect the device unit size as far as its width minus the 20 pixels left and right. And so I've done little red box views for those margins that we want to maintain. And this will give us then some idea as far as what we can design with. So I'm going to click the button here. I'm running this in a Pixel 5 Android emulator, and I'm told that the width is 392 device independent units. The height is 850. That's calculated by taking the width and dividing it by the density. So on this particular device, the density is 2.75. A lot of devices, maybe it's 3. So I have 352 units to work with as far as the width if I maintain margins at 20 units left and right. So we're going to create this application, and this will be our first project as a tool to help us in designing more projects. In starting a project, I often like to do a storyboard of my interface, and I'll do that with paper and pencil, or in my case I actually use friction-based erasable pens with a page that I designed to work with my Rocketbook. And the Rocketbook's a really cool product in that it has an app, and you can take paper-based notes and scan those notes into a PDF, and we'll copy that PDF to destinations, which you see the X's at the bottom of my page. One's going to my email, one's going into a projects folder on my Google Drive. And with the storyboard, I like to put some notes in terms of what I'm thinking the different options are, maybe the sizes of, maybe the attributes of various controls. And the idea behind this is I could actually turn this over to another designer and they can create the interface as I had intended. So now we'll go into Visual Studio and design the interface with XAML and the code behind in C# so that we can get our app to look like this. And we click the Show Dimensions button. It will determine the width of our device independent units minus the 20 pixels left and right for the left and right margins. Let's go into Visual Studio. In Visual Studio for Windows, I'm going to create a new project. I want a .NET MAUI app. I'm going to name this MAUI Device Units. I'm going to use .NET 7. And then here is my Solution Explorer. We're going to focus on the main page XAML and the main page XAML.cs under that. So let's go to the main page XAML and we'll see the boilerplate of the default app. So I'm going to double click on that. And we're going to make some changes to this. So we have our namespaces for MAUI and XAML. We have our class of main page. This is all in a scroll view. And we have a vertical stack layout that contains all of the items. Now within that vertical stack layout we'll have our views, but we'll also have some other stack layouts including horizontal and vertical. So I'm going to make some changes here. I'm going to change the spacing to 10. I'm going to get rid of the padding. And we'll keep the vertical options as center. Now I don't want any margins or padding here on the left and right because I want my little red box views that we saw in the storyboard to be right up against the left and right edge of the page. If you wanted to set up margins, you could actually create a margin that would have 0 on the left and maybe say 20 at the top, 0 on the right, and say 20 at the bottom. Or I could also write this as 0, 20. The 0 would be the horizontal, left and right, 20 would be the top and bottom. I'm going to get rid of the image. And we'll start with a label. So this is going to be our title. I'm just going to call it device unit size. I'll leave the semantic properties, level 1. Font size, let's make this a title. And the horizontal options will be center. I'm also going to add font attributes equals bold. I think that's probably built into the title, but just to be sure, we'll add that in. And again, I can add these things in with the property panel if I wanted. I usually just type the items in that I want. Okay, next we're going to have a label. Now this label I'm going to actually, since it's kind of a paragraph of text, I find it easier if I have a lot of text just to do it in the loading from C#. So I'm just going to put a note here, basically load from C#. Now if we're referring to something in code, we need to give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to add an X name equals, and we'll call this one LBL description. Of course, I use Hungarian notation a lot, so LBL refers to a label. Although in .NET MAUI, I don't use Hungarian notation quite as much. I use mixed names of Hungarian and descriptive. We'll leave the semantic properties, although I'm just going to say about the app for the description. Font size, I'm going to set this at 14. Since the paragraph is going to be quite a bit of text, I want to make it a little bit smaller, and I do want it to be centered horizontally. Now that is the horizontal centering of the label and not the centering of the text itself. If you wanted the text to be centered, we can do a horizontal text alignment equals center. Next we have a button. I'm going to change the name of the button to BTN show units. I'm going to change the text to show units. Semantic properties hint will be calculates and displays the DIU units. And I'm going to change the clicked event to on show units clicked. And you can leave this centered horizontally. At this point, I'm noticing a couple errors. I got a little squiggly here under the label because I forgot to, or accidentally erased the greater than tag to end that opening vertical stack layout tag. And then the name counter button does not exist in the current context. That's coming from the link of my XAML to C#. I had the on counter clicked. We changed it here to on show units clicked, but I need to go into C# and change this on counter clicked now to on show units clicked. I can get rid of this code, and I need to change this counter button to btn show units. And we're not going to use this variable, so I'm going to delete that. The other thing I want to do here is in the main page, remember on this XAML, we have the description being loaded from C# for the text of the label, and that's our LBL description. So after we initialize the components, let's do an LBL description dot text equals .NET MAUI uses, and rather than watch me type all this in, I'm going to pause the video here and I'll resume once I get it typed in. There then is our description. I would suggest you pause here, make sure you get all that typed in, come back, and then we'll test this and see how things look thus far. So I'm going to run this in an Android emulator. So I'm using the Pixel 5, API 33, and we'll run. It's going to take a couple minutes probably to build this and to deploy it the first time to the device. So I'm going to fast forward in the process. But be patient. Like I said, it'll take a couple minutes. There's our splash screen. And there's our project running to this point. Now notice the description is all the way up to the left margin. If we didn't set any left or right margins for our vertical stack layout. So I probably want to set some margins here on that particular label. I'm going to end, and we'll continue to work on the interface. So I'm going to go back to the XAML. And let's add a margin here of 20 and 0. And again, I can test this and see what this is going to look like. And in reality, I could have been able to do this without ending the emulator and do it as a hot reload. That looks much better. And let's continue on. Next, we want to add in our two labels for our output. The first will show the width and the height and the density. It's going to start being blank. And then the second one will show the width of the device independent units minus the margin of 20 pixels left and right. But initially it'll provide the instructions of click the button above. I would just pause the video here, see if you can do that on your own, and then I'll show you my solution. Here's my solution to adding those two labels. The first one I gave the name of LBL output with the width request of 300. I used just a space, or you could use just two quotes, but I put a space in for the text. Set the text color to black. Horizontal text alignment center, font size 12, font attributes bold, and max lines equals 3. Pretty much the same thing with the second one, just named it LBL output. Changed the color to red. The text is click the button above. And font size is 14, max lines equals 2. Next, we want to create a vertical stack layout that will contain a label that says the purple indicator below is at 100 DIU. I'm going to add a vertical stack layout, both an opening and closing tag. And then inside of that, we'll add our label. Inside the vertical stack layout, we'll do a horizontal stack layout that's going to contain a box view that is 20 by 20 width and height, and make it red. And that's going to show our margin on the left hand side, and we'll have a label then to the right of that within the horizontal stack layout of the left margin shown in red at 20 DIU. We're going to use a font size of micro, so it's very small. And we'll set the vertical text alignment center so that it is basically aligned with our box view. And I'll set the height request to 20 on that as well. Then we'll do a label named LBL fill. It's going to have a purple background and a text of nothing to start with. We'll set the text color to white and the width request to 100 and the height request to 30. want the font attributes to be bold, the font size of medium, horizontal text alignment is center, and vertical text alignment is center. We're going to center the text inside that label. This is going to be our indicator in terms of the width that we have to work with minus our margins. And the width of this will change programmatically when we click the button. Then we'll conclude our interface in XAML by adding another horizontal stack layout that's going to contain the label that shows the right margins being shown in red at 20 DIU, and then a box view for that margin indicator. That should conclude our XAML. We now need to go over to our C# and code the button. So you don't have to watch me type in my code. Let me pause the video here, enter my code, and come back and explain it. There's a device display object, and we can get the current screen and get the main display info.width and .height and .density. Those are double values, so I simply put those into variables called my width, my height, and my density, just to simplify things. LBL output, our label named LBL output, we're going to set the text equal to a formatted string of width, and then the integer value of my width, I'm going to take that from a double to an integer, so getting rid of any decimal values. The word pixels, and then height is the integer value of my height, pixels, and density equals the value of my density. Those are the values that we use to calculate then what the width is in device independent units as well as the height. So LBL output 2.text, again a formatted string. This is going to be width. I'm going to take the integer value of my width and divide that by my density. That's going to be our device independent units. And the height is going to be the integer value of my height divided by my density. Then I want to change that indicator, LBL indicator.text, so it shows what the width is minus the 40 pixels for our margins, 20 left, 20 right. So I'm changing that value that was initially 100 to whatever the current indicator is going to be, and then I'm going to change that indicator. That was our LBL fill. So I'm going to set the text equal to that same information, and then I want to set the width request equal to the value of the device independent units minus those 40 margins again. Let's run this and see if it works. And on this Pixel 5, we're getting 392 DIU for the width, 850 for the height, minus our 20 margins, and what we have to work with then, as the purple indicator shows, is 350 DIU. I'm going to close that. Let's select a different emulator. I'm going to select a tablet Kindle Fire emulator. Let's run it on that. And the Kindle Fire, we have 396 DIU. That's relatively small for a tablet. The Kindle Fire isn't a huge resolution tablet. Let's see, it's 1920 by 1200. I also ran this on the Macintosh. Let me show you the screenshots from several iOS devices. So I hope in this project you got some good experience in laying out the XAML code as well as doing a little bit of C# coding, but also very importantly that you've gotten a better feel for working with device independent units. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the .NET MAUI Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.